There's a quiet command that most people can't comprehend because it never raises its voice. It doesn't pursue validation or beg to be noticed. Yet, its presence is felt in every room. We live in a society that rewards the loudest noise, the quickest comebacks, the most assertive displays, and relentless activity. But deep perception, particularly in a woman, is frequently silent, not from a place of fear, but because it's deeply rooted, centered, and complete. A truly perceptive woman isn't always the one with the fanciest credentials or the most forceful take. She is the one who can disengage from turmoil without needing to win the argument. She is the one who knows the vast space between being noticed and being respected. She is the one who understands this core truth. The way I treat myself establishes the baseline for every connection I form. So, this isn't about how to make a great impression. It's not a guide to achieving flawlessness. It's a journey into awareness. Because the second a woman becomes aware of her patterns, how she walks, what she thinks, how she responds, she activates a silent potency that recalibrates the energy of any space she enters. Let's step into that awareness together. If this is your first time, welcome to Self-Mastery, where we deliver timeless truths to help you shield your energy, elevate your perspective, and move with purpose. Subscribe and click the notification bell so you won't miss a message that connects with your soul, fortifies your spirit, and could transform your entire life's direction. Let's start. There's a universe of difference between being quiet and being still. Countless people are silent on the outside, while their minds are a chaotic storm, full of internal chatter, pleading for validation, terrified of criticism, and starving for praise. But a highly perceptive woman learns a secret few ever grasp. Inner peace isn't about silencing noise. It's about ending the war within. She doesn't hide from people to shield her tranquility. She simply refuses to let everything command her focus. Her mind transforms into a sacred garden, not accessible to every conversation, not vulnerable to every emotional storm. This isn't born from a sense of superiority. It's the product of profound clarity, the kind of clarity that comes from living through the consequences of trading your internal serenity to manage external drama. She has learned, maybe through difficult lessons, that perpetually joining debates to prove she's right, endlessly justifying her limits, and constantly absorbing others' feelings does not create peace. It only drains her spirit. In neuroscience, there's a principle called cognitive overhead. It measures the amount of data your mind is juggling at any given time. Excessive stimulation, be it from toxic discussions, emotional turmoil, or simply overthinking, releases stress hormones like cortisol. With time, this mental strain can weaken the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that governs wise choices, self-regulation, and compassion. But when a woman learns to cultivate her inner quiet, she fortifies that sacred space. She allows her mind and body the room they need to recalibrate. And this one act becomes the bedrock of her emotional intelligence, not as a concept, but in how she exists within her relationships. Picture a woman who is in constant reaction mode. Her partner says something careless, and she fires back instantly. Her manager ignores her contribution, and she sees this with resentment. A friend neglects to check in, and she perceives it as a deep rejection. Her existence is an emotional tidal wave, draining, unmoored, and volatile. Her nervous system is always on high alert. Now, imagine a different woman. Her partner's tone gets sharp. She stops, inhales, and in that space, she doesn't just register his words. She senses his struggle. She refuses to mirror his frantic energy. She stays anchored in her own center. And from that stability, she selects a response that is measured, not impulsive. This is the potency of inner stillness. It is not fragility, it is self-command, and it reshapes the way people respond to you. In ancient traditions, there is a saying, "The wise one drinks the water, but feels the current." It implies she doesn't just exist in life, she listens to its deeper vibrations. She reads energy. She sees when a person's smile doesn't reach their eyes. She can feel the unspoken truth hanging in the air. Because her mind isn't clogged with static, her vision is sharp. A woman like this becomes an enigma to most people. Why? She isn't predictable. She refuses to engage in every conflict. She sidesteps needless drama. She will not add her voice to every dispute. In a culture hooked on reaction, her self-control is captivating. People sense a unique quality in her presence, a foundation, a quiet certainty. And this silence is more than spiritual, it's immensely practical. In the world of our connections, it's the pivot between a fight that blows up and a bond that gets stronger. There's a tale of a village elder known for mediating spats between couples. They would come to her seeking a quick fix, but she would often just sit in silence for long stretches, eyes shut, simply absorbing. When they asked about her delay, she'd say, "I wait for the truth to surface from the quiet, not the fury, not the worry, just the truth." This is the woman who does not speak from her hurt. She holds back until her own wisdom has settled, and only then does she share her words. Modern science backs this up. Research indicates that allowing your brain just 90 seconds of quiet after an emotional trigger lets the amygdala, your emotional hub, cool down, which allows your rational mind to come back online. This means that if you just pause for a moment before you respond, your odds of offering wisdom instead of words you'll later regret skyrocket. Deeply perceptive women know this, and so they exercise silence not just in morning routines, but in the eye of the storm. When attacked, they don't scramble to defend. When misunderstood, they don't frantically try to clarify. When overlooked, they don't diminish themselves. They remain centered within. And from that inner stability, the next right action becomes clear. But this quiet is not an absence of feeling. To the contrary, it signifies that they feel it all, but are controlled by none of it. This leads to the second practice, knowing when to be tender and when to be firm. Tenderness is so often mislabeled as weakness, and strength is frequently mistaken for hardness. But a highly perceptive woman has moved past these simple-minded labels. She has been too yielding and been taken for granted. She has been too rigid and shut out affection. Now, through careful introspection and self-awareness, she holds both tenderness and firmness in a beautiful equilibrium. Emotional discipline is the quiet art she hones daily, not for anyone else's benefit, but because she holds her own energy in high regard. She is aware that a fiery outburst may feel strong in the moment, but it leaves her depleted. She is aware that always being the one to yield too fast, bend too much, or stay quiet just to keep the peace ultimately chips away at her self-respect. So, she develops a new cadence. When a man disrespects her personal line, she doesn't erupt. She just calmly revokes his access to her space. When a friend reaches out only when they want something, she doesn't deliver a lecture. She simply stops being available at a moment's notice. When life gets overwhelming, she doesn't fall apart. She slows her pace, tunes into her body, and recalibrates. This is steel, silent, composed, solid, unbending. But within that steel, there is an enduring softness. The softness to extend grace without being a doormat. The softness to shed tears without falling into chaos. The softness to love with all her heart without erasing herself. Psychologists call this emotional regulation, the capacity to move between different feeling states without getting trapped. It isn't a lack of emotion, but the presence of choice. In relationships, this fosters profound trust. Men, for instance, often feel far safer emotionally with a woman who can feel things powerfully without getting lost in them. A woman who can articulate her needs with precision, not with accusation or manipulation. A woman who can carry herself with elegance even when circumstances are difficult. This is not a performance. It's deep maturity, and it is a magnet for true connection. There's a story of a woman whose partner grew emotionally cold and unavailable. For months, she tried it all, heart to hearts, desperate pleas, even stony silence. Nothing worked. Then one evening, rather than falling into the same old loop, she stated with immense calm, "I adore you, but I can no longer be the only one holding this relationship up. I am right here if you want to rebuild with me. But my days of pleading for your attention are over. It was the very first time he actually saw her, not because she was more forceful, but because she was more defined. Her words weren't a desperate ultimatum. They were an unshakable boundary, and he could feel the bedrock of steel beneath her tender heart. This is the kind of woman who commands respect. Even if they don't see eye to eye with her, they feel that she stands behind her words. Her energy isn't frantic. Her affection isn't needy. Her feelings are not out of control. She brings a sense of peace, and people will either rise up to her level or drift away on their own accord. From a neurological standpoint, this self-regulation strengthens the prefrontal cortex, which creates a positive feedback loop of ever-increasing resilience. When a woman manages her emotions well, she generates more security in her connections. When her connections feel secure, her brain grows even more flexible and resourceful. It's a powerful cycle of self-command, but it begins with a single habit: pausing, taking one deep breath before she speaks, and asking herself, is this response in line with the woman I am becoming? Choosing her tone, her moment, and her truth with intention. And even on the days she fails, which every human does, she doesn't berate herself. She reflects, she readjusts, she evolves. That is emotional intelligence in motion. A woman who knows when to be gentle and when to be still is not easily manipulated. She can't be pressured into giving more than she has, nor can she be provoked into saying things she'll regret. She acts with purpose, and this lends an unseen but undeniable power to her connections. She doesn't depend on control or submission. She lives from a place of balance, and this balance of quiet discernment, of tenderness and strength, becomes the core of her influence, her love, and her legacy. There is an unseen talent that deeply perceptive women possess, one that is often ignored in a world that values how loud a person can be. That talent is observation. She has conditioned herself to see, to hear beneath the words, to stay anchored in awareness when the world is screaming at her to react. This habit isn't born from timidity, but from discipline. It is a quiet expression of power, a choice to understand a situation before demanding to be understood. A highly perceptive woman watches more than she talks, not because she's empty of ideas, but because she's realized most people only listen with the intent to reply, not to comprehend. And she has zero interest in pouring her energy into superficial exchanges or flimsy bonds. There's a tale of a woman who joined a new company. While her colleagues scrambled to make their mark, assert their competence, and stake out their territory, she hung back for the first couple of weeks. She watched, she listened. She noticed the shifts in how people spoke when the boss was in the room versus when he was gone. She identified who grabbed the credit, who accepted the blame, and who vanished during a disagreement. By the month's end, she had drawn a map, not just of job descriptions, but of the inner landscape of personalities, motivations, and integrity. This practice of quiet observation gave her the ability to navigate with wisdom instead of fear. When she finally offered her thoughts, her words had substance, not because she spoke the loudest, but because her perspective was anchored in presence. And presence is a rare commodity. When a woman genuinely sees other people, not with criticism, but with clarity, she earns a form of respect that can never be demanded. Neuroscience confirms this. The practice of deep observation stimulates the mirror neuron system, a brain network that enables us to feel empathy and intuitively grasp the emotional states of others. When a woman trains herself to look beyond mere words to tone, body language, and energy, she is sharpening her intuitive sense. This intuition, sometimes called a woman's sixth sense, isn't some paranormal gift. It is the fusion of focused attention and emotional intelligence. Many women can recount stories of looking back and seeing that they recognized the red flags, but chose to dismiss them. The partner who could never hold their gaze during an apology. the friend whose compliments were always tinged with rivalry, the coworker who was friendly in group settings but cold in private. All the signals were present but were lost in the noise of daily life, distractions, and the deep-seated desire to see the best in people. But the truly perceptive woman doesn't leap to assumptions or scramble to make her case. She pauses, she contemplates. She observes how people act when they are upset, when they are joyful, when they feel dominant, and when they feel vulnerable. She listens with every part of her being because she gets that people show you who they are not just in their speeches, but in their delivery and in the things they choose to leave unsaid. In relationships, this practice serves as both a shield and a bridge to connection. A woman who is observant is not easily tricked by surface-level charm. She sees past the crafted persona. She perceives the disconnects between a person's claims and their conduct. She watches how a man interacts with service staff, talks about his former partners, deals with rejection, or handles being corrected. From these small clues, she discerns his character. But she also uses this skill to foster love. She sees that her partner is withdrawn, not because he's shutting her out, but because he's carrying a heavy weight. She senses when something is wrong, not because he announces it, but because his energetic field has shifted. And this gives her the ability to show up in ways that build a sense of safety. Because she's not making assumptions, she's paying attention. A wise woman once said, "I avoid asking too many questions. I simply watch as the answers reveal themselves." This calm awareness makes her feel magnetic. The way she listens makes others feel truly seen. She picks up on the little things. The way someone's tone changes when they mention their passion. The way their shoulders relax when they finally feel secure. The way their face lights up when they remember their childhood. And because she truly sees people, people confide in her. But her observation isn't a passive state. She uses it to steer her own actions as well. She notices her own tone when she's getting tired. She observes the loops in her own thinking when she's feeling insecure. She becomes a dedicated student of her own internal landscape. And this is where observation becomes deep change. When she can watch herself without harsh self-criticism, she is capable of changing with grace. She recognizes when she's slipping back into old patterns, trying to please everyone, over-justifying herself, shutting down emotionally. And because she can see these behaviors clearly, she is not controlled by them. This self-awareness cultivates emotional liberty. It's the difference between declaring, "This is just my personality," and stating, "That was who I once was." From this grounded posture of observation, another potent practice naturally follows creation. A highly perceptive woman is not satisfied by simply consuming content, fads, narratives, or validation. She is a creator. She creates sanctuary for her thoughts. She creates time for her own health. She creates elegance in her space, harmony in her relationships, and a deliberate rhythm for her days. This creative act isn't always for public display. It might not get featured on a big stage or in a fancy portfolio, but its reality is undeniable. She puts her thoughts into her journal. She prepares food with mindfulness. She designs her morning routine with care. She organizes her environment with intention. And in doing so, she reinforces a daily truth. I am the architect of my own life, not just a bystander waiting for the plot to unfold. There's a clear distinction between busyness and building. One is driven by habit, the other by vision. A woman who is constantly scrolling, responding, rushing, and refreshing, she is in a state of busyness. But a woman who stops to create, who reads to expand her mind, writes to clarify her soul, and builds to give form to her spirit, that woman is in a state of building, intentional, guided, and alive. This fundamental shift from consumption to creation transforms everything, especially relationships. When a woman is forever consuming other people's advice, validation, and viewpoints, she loses touch with her own internal compass. She becomes reliant on others to define what is correct, what she should feel, and who she ought to be. But when she begins to create, she takes back that authority. Her journal becomes her confidant. Her daily rhythms become her safe harbor. Her quiet moments become her wisest counsel. In love, this practice is a powerful antidote to emotional codependence. She does not depend on her partner to be her source of purpose or stability. She brings a complete life to the connection. She makes her own joy instead of waiting for it. She offers her own care instead of demanding it. And this makes her love feel expansive, not grasping. There's a story of a woman navigating a devastating breakup. Her whole identity had been enmeshed in her partnership. When it was over, she was completely adrift. For months, she just consumed self-help content, therapy, workshops. They were all helpful, but a core piece was missing. Then one afternoon, she picked up an old paintbrush. She hadn't made art in a decade. As she started to create something new, a change took place. The sadness didn't vanish, but it was reshaped. Her art became her voice, her reflection, a pathway back to her true self. She later explained, "It wasn't really the painting that healed me. It was the powerful reminder that I still had something of my own to give the world, something beyond my personal pain." This is the inherent wisdom of creation. It's not about making a perfect product. It's about the practice of being present. And in that presence, a woman is reminded of who she truly is. Science confirms this. Taking part in creative pursuits activates the brain's default mode network, which facilitates self-reflection, the processing of emotions, and even finding solutions to problems. When a woman creates, she isn't running from her life, she's making sense of it. This habit also transforms her perception of time. She no longer has the feeling that her life is just something that happens to her. She becomes a creator, not merely a responder. She gets to decide how her day starts and ends, how she rests, and how she restores her spirit. She doesn't just consume meals, she creates nourishment. She doesn't just consume media, she sets firm boundaries around it. She doesn't just consume relationships, she actively contributes life to them. And when she does this, a wonderful thing happens. Her energy becomes compelling. People can sense when a woman is living from a place of intention. Her presence has substance. She doesn't need to chase anyone's attention. She doesn't need to compete. She simply is. And that authentic being is infinitely more potent than any act. But this creation also demands self-discipline. It's far easier to scroll than to write, easier to respond than to build, easier to distract than to reflect. And so the highly perceptive woman doesn't sit around waiting for inspiration. She establishes a rhythm, a dedicated space in her life where creation is simply a habit. It might be 10 minutes in the morning, a quiet walk after dinner, or a single day each week unplugged from the digital world. She stays committed. And in doing so, she finds herself again and again, not in the external noise, but in the quiet, decisive act of choosing what she puts into her world. Observation reveals to her what is. Creation reminds her of what is possible. And together, these form the foundation of a life driven by purpose, not by performance. There is a silent grace to a woman who doesn't feel the need to justify her boundaries. She doesn't broadcast them with hostility. She doesn't plead for them to be honored. She refuses to betray herself just to keep others comfortable. Her boundary is not a fortress wall. It is her natural current. Those who can flow with that current are welcome to stay. Those who can't simply drift into the periphery of her existence. A highly perceptive woman knows that boundaries aren't about walling people off. They are about keeping her own energy in alignment. She has learned from her own history that pouring herself into people who invest little in return only leads to burnout, bitterness, and a total loss of her own core. And so her boundaries become sacred, not through aggressive enforcement, but through unwavering consistency. When a person consistently shows they don't respect her time, she doesn't raise her voice. She simply becomes less accessible. When someone steps over a line, even in a small way, with a dismissive comment or a manipulative tactic, She doesn't beg them to acknowledge her value. She withdraws with poise, with serenity, and with closure. In that quiet retreat, she communicates a clear message, not with her mouth, but with her actions. I will always choose myself. The world often fails to understand women like this. They get labeled as aloof, cold, or arrogant. But what gets missed is the deep wisdom that fuels their silence. They have wept alone. They have bent until they nearly broke before. They have poured out their hurt to people who wouldn't listen. And it was in that crucible they were forged, not into something hard, but into something clear. And clarity has no need to be loud. In psychology, the term enmeshment describes a dissolving of personal limits in relationships, where one person's identity gets so wrapped up in another's that their own sense of self gets lost. Highly perceptive women have often survived these kinds of connections. They have loved so hard they disappeared. And when that love wasn't met with the same respect, they were left feeling hollow. But instead of letting bitterness take root, they got better. Not more vocal, but more defined. And from that place of clarity, they began to construct a life where their personal lines weren't reactive defenses, but authentic expressions of self-worth. Think of the woman who used to say yes to everything. Yes to pitching in. Yes to working late. Yes to pardoning offenses without any real healing. She believed that love required constant self-sacrifice. She thought that being constantly available was the same as being valuable. But on the inside, she was slowly fracturing. Nobody saw it because she never let it show, until one day she simply couldn't give what she no longer had. She hit the wall of complete burnout, not just a physical exhaustion, but a spiritual one. It was in the silence that followed, after being totally emptied, that she had a sacred insight. Nobody was going to hand her the life she craved unless she took ownership of it, and taking ownership required boundaries. She started with small steps, turning her phone off at 8 p.m. without an apology, just doing it. Declining invitations that didn't resonate with her, taking a rain check when her body was screaming for rest, refusing to engage with backhanded compliments. And little by little, her world began to reshape itself. Some friends drifted off, others leaned in closer, now approaching her with the same consideration she had started to give herself. A woman who doesn't justify her boundaries is not heartless. She is simply no longer open for business with dynamics that devalue her. She knows that a man who is truly for her won't need her to shrink, to overcommit, or to explain her existence just to feel seen. He will understand her silences. He will honor her rhythm. He will cherish her peace. In relationships, this serves as a powerful filtering system. People who are used to pushing on others' limits with guilt, emotional games, or subtle pressure will quickly realize there is no leverage. She refuses to play emotional tug of war. She disengages, even if it's painful, because for her, no connection is worth the price of self-abandonment. There's a quote that goes, "Your boundary is your own business. If someone doesn't approve, they are at liberty to leave." The highly perceptive woman lives this truth, not as a defense, but as her operating system. She has zero to prove. Her presence says enough. Her absence says enough. Her peace says enough. But her boundaries are not just for others. They are also for herself. She establishes limits with her own habits of rumination, of self-attack, of reopening wounds that are trying to close. She sees when her mind is getting caught in old narratives. Stories where she wasn't good enough, wasn't wanted, wasn't the one. And she calmly tells herself, "Not this time. That is not where I live anymore." This self-boundary is an act of deep internal leadership. She is no longer subject to the whim of every thought and feeling. She respects her own life force too much to let it be squandered on what-ifs or payback fantasies. Her focus becomes a precious resource, and she spends it only on things that are true for her. One woman shared how she used to allow people to rationalize their poor treatment of her. "He's just stressed. She didn't mean it that way. They are trying their best." But eventually, She saw that constantly accommodating others' lack of consistency was eroding her own soul. She wasn't just permitting them to treat her badly, she was teaching them that it was okay. So she made a change. Now, when someone says sorry, but their behavior never shifts, she walks away. When someone makes a promise, but there's no follow-through, she changes her expectations. Not with bitterness, but with clarity, because she has come to understand that love without respect is a hollow shell, and attention without consistency is not a real connection. In romance, this kind of woman is both enigmatic and anchoring. Enigmatic because she can't be easily swayed or manipulated. Anchoring because her energy provides stability. Her partner feels the security of her standards. He understands that while her love runs deep, it is not unconditional in a way that excuses a lack of accountability. She will not beg. She will not try to persuade. She will not sacrifice her essence just to hold on to someone's interest. This is not power through control. It is power through self-possession. She knows herself, she knows her values, and she knows that anyone who attempts to breach her limits under the guise of affection isn't offering real love at all. Eastern wisdom teaches that a woman who is in harmony with her own being is like water, gentle but with the power to wear away mountains. She doesn't fight against life, she flows with its current. And a key part of that flow is recognizing when to say no, when to retreat, and when to guard the very space that lets her thrive. That protection isn't always a grand gesture. Sometimes it's just turning off the news. Sometimes it's not participating in a family squabble. Sometimes it's declining to offer an emotional response when someone is clearly attempting to provoke her. And sometimes it's just choosing silence over arguing with someone who is determined to misunderstand her. There is incredible peace in no longer needing to justify everything, in trusting that what is meant for you will remain, and what isn't will fall away. Boundaries are not built overnight. They are sculpted through years of life, moments of profound heartbreak, and the quiet, firm decision to never, ever abandon oneself again. A woman who has known betrayal, disappointment, and profound confusion eventually finds her way to this sacred understanding. I know exactly how it feels to be treated as less than. I will not tolerate it again, not from them and not from me. And with that, her life simplifies, not because all conflict vanishes, but because the inner chaos dissipates. Her yes is rich with her presence. Her no is full of serenity, and she has no desire to defend either one. A woman who moves in this way changes the very air around her. People start to be more conscious in her company, more considerate, not from intimidation, but from respect. They can feel that this is not someone you can play games with, not someone you can string along with breadcrumbs, not someone you can guilt or gaslight or slowly diminish. This woman has come home to herself, and by doing so, she instructs others on how to treat her, not with lectures, but with her very being. If someone asks why she won't allow something, she won't give them a monologue. She might just smile and turn away, because her boundary isn't a point of debate. It is a quiet reflection of her own worth, and it needs no one's approval. There is a profound potency in a woman who holds herself with dignity, not just in her words or her posture, but in her daily, sacred routines. Not the big, public acts that earn applause, but the small, consistent things she does when she is completely alone. These little routines, so often seen as trivial, are the very foundation of her self-worth. They are the tangible evidence of how she values herself, not as a theory, but as a daily practice. A highly perceptive woman knows that confidence is not a random occurrence. It's a consequence. It's the outcome of how she speaks to herself, nourishes herself, rests, moves, adorns her body, listens to her soul, and returns to her own quiet center. These may appear to be mundane activities, but they are the building blocks of her identity. They create the fertile ground from which her relationships, her choices, and her inner calm can flourish. It starts from the moment she opens her eyes. An aligned woman does not instinctively grab for her phone. She reaches for quiet, for intention, for presence. She gets that the very first thoughts she invites in will color the entire emotional landscape of her day. And so she designs a morning practice that reminds her of her true self before the world can dictate who she should be. It could be a few slow breaths, a hot cup of tea, a scribbled line in a journal, a few quiet minutes looking out the window, not because she has to, but because she honors herself enough to start her day from a place of awareness. There's a story of a woman who was perpetually drained, not just by her job, but by the relentless emotional needs of those around her. Children, colleagues, a partner who consistently took more than he gave. She was starting to lose herself entirely. Her moods were volatile, her body perpetually tight. One day, a friend gave her a simple piece of advice. Spend 10 minutes every morning doing something only for you, something that anchors you. She was skeptical at first. How could that possibly change anything, she thought. But she gave it a try. Just 10 minutes of quiet with a journal. No one could interrupt her. No screens, no demands. Within 3 weeks, her whole world had shifted. Not because her circumstances had become easier, but because she had become stronger. She noticed she was less reactive to triggers. Her decisions were clearer. She felt more solid in her interactions. That one simple ritual, 10 minutes a day, had become her personal sanctuary. What this teaches us is profoundly simple self-respect is built over time. You don't get it from one huge act of bravery. You forge it through the small daily acts that reaffirm your value, especially during times when others may not recognize it. A woman who practices this stops searching for her worth in toxic environments. She doesn't require a man's non-stop reassurance to feel attractive because she has already taken the time to tend to her body with care. She doesn't depend on public accolades to feel capable because she has already been her own witness, watching herself follow through on her commitments, even if it was just drinking enough water, finishing her walk, or writing a single truthful sentence. Her tiny victories accumulate, they compound. They become her unspoken strength, and this strength shines through in her connections. A woman who respects herself becomes more discerning, not out of pride, but out of self-awareness. She doesn't engage in hollow small talk. She doesn't permit inconsistent people to siphon her energy. She won't stay in situations where she must repeatedly plead her case for basic kindness. She isn't harsh. She just understands that she doesn't need to give up her routines, her rhythm, or her sanity to be loved. The love she seeks must be a reflection of the love she already provides for herself. Psychology teaches us that rituals give the brain a sense of safety. Our nervous systems are wired to thrive on a sense of predictability. When a woman builds consistent routines, morning walks, journaling, breath work, mindful eating, she is sending a clear message to her brain. You are safe. You are grounded. You are taken care of. This feeling of internal security directly impacts how she navigates external storms. Imagine a woman in a roller coaster relationship. One day he's present and loving, the next he's cold and remote. Her heart, in a constant state of confusion, starts to doubt her own value. But because she has anchored herself in her daily practices, she doesn't disintegrate. She will feel the sting, of course, but she knows the way back to herself. She has trained her nervous system to recognize what home feels like, not in someone else, but inside her own body and her own breath. This isn't just a nice idea, it's physiological memory. A woman who nourishes herself every day builds powerful emotional resilience. Her routines are a constant reminder. No matter what is happening out there, I still have myself. And that quiet reassurance is what keeps her from being pulled into a vortex when the world lets her down. There's a woman who created a habit of lighting a single candle every evening before sleep. It seems so minor, but for her, it was a sacred symbol that even at the end of a turbulent day, she could come back to a source of light. That little flame was a meditation, a prayer, a promise to herself. On nights filled with heartbreak, she still lit it. On joyful nights, she lit it. On numb nights, when she felt nothing, she still lit it. That act of consistency became a source of healing, a reminder that even when everything outside of her was shifting, she was still present for herself. And that is the core of daily rituals. They aren't designed to fix you. They are designed to reconnect you with your own dignity, your strength, your beauty, and your sacredness. In relationships, this has a profound effect. A woman who is rooted in her own routines won't chase emotional extremes. She doesn't require constant turmoil to feel passionate. Her own inner landscape is already full of life. She brings a calm presence into her connections, not chaos. She listens with more depth, speaks with more intention, and responds with more wisdom because she isn't operating from a place of lack. She is whole, and that wholeness can be felt. She is compelling not because of what she says, but because of the deep peace she embodies. A man might not consciously know why he feels so at ease with her. He just does, because her energy isn't frantic. Her attention isn't grasping. Her presence isn't demanding. She is simply there, whole, centered, and fully present. This also gives her the fortitude to walk away when she must, not with anger, but with reverence for her own well-being. She doesn't slam doors. She simply closes them quietly, feeling no need for a final word, because her rituals have taught her that solitude is not a sentence, it is a homecoming. She knows how to be by herself without ever being lonely, because in her private rituals, she has become her own best friend. One of the most powerful decisions a woman can make is to begin treating herself with the same care she wishes to receive from others, to speak to herself gently, to nourish herself with love, to adorn herself with grace, to give herself permission to rest, to move her body with respect. When she does this consistently, the outside world starts to reflect it back to her. There is a famous saying, "You show people how to treat you by the way you treat yourself." This isn't just a feel-good platitude. It is a universal pattern that repeats itself. When a woman consistently puts her own needs last to accommodate everyone else, people start to internalize the message that her needs are secondary, not because they are bad people, but because she modeled it. But when she consistently honors her own space, energy, and personal rhythm, others learn a new rule. This is a woman you must meet with full presence, or you don't meet her at all. In the journey of self-command, rituals evolve into more than just habits. They become spiritual disciplines, a daily declaration that says, "I am worthy, I am complete, I am the sole guardian of my own energy." And this responsibility is not a weight, it is the ultimate freedom. Because once a woman claims it, she stops waiting for others to fill her emotional well. She fills it herself every day with care and with joy. In Eastern thought, there is a concept that the way you approach one thing is the way you approach everything. How you make your bed, how you sip your tea, how you take each step, it is all a direct reflection of your internal state. A woman who barrels through her day full of tension may not realize the effect it has on her connections. But a woman who pauses to take a deep breath while brushing her hair, who curates her living space with purpose, who sits in stillness with her food, she brings that very same presence into her interactions. Presence is the direct result of ritual, and presence is the most valuable gift in love. Imagine having a relationship with someone who is completely present with you, who doesn't glance at their phone while you're talking, who recalls what you mentioned yesterday, who senses your mood before you even speak. That level of attention is exceedingly rare. And it all begins with how a person treats themselves, because a woman cannot give the gift of her presence to another if she is constantly absent from her own life. So these daily rituals, as small as they may seem, are anything but insignificant. They are the roots that ground her inner garden. If she abandons them, her spirit becomes brittle. But if she tends to them, her energy becomes a wellspring of strength, not just for herself, but for everyone fortunate enough to be around her. There is no one size fits all ritual. Some women dance in the morning, Others sit in silence. Some write unsent letters. Others walk barefoot on the grass to feel the earth. Some pray, some stretch, some sing. The what is not what matters. What matters is that she does it for herself. Not to put on a show, not to gain approval, but to come home. Home to her center, home to herself, home to her truth. And when she does this, day after day, her relationships are transformed. Not because other people suddenly improve, but because as she does, she becomes a woman who knows what she truly requires. A woman who gives from a place of abundance, not of lack. A woman who enters a room not secretly hoping to be chosen, but already secure in her own wholeness. And this wholeness, it can't be imitated, it must be lived. And it is lived one sacred ritual at a time. When a woman starts to live with this level of intention, when her practices are anchored in self-respect, her silence becomes sacred, her emotions become disciplined, her mind becomes observant, her life becomes creative, her boundaries are clear, and her rituals are consistent. She no longer moves through the world searching for her value. She is the embodiment of it. She stops asking, "Am I good enough?" because she feels her own sufficiency in the way she greets the day. She stops wondering, "Will they choose me?" because she no longer attaches herself to those who require convincing. She becomes a woman whose presence speaks long before her voice does. Not because she is forceful, but because she is aligned. And in that deep alignment, her connections change. Her standards elevate. Her inner circle gets smaller and stronger. She no longer is afraid of being by herself because she is never truly apart from her own spirit. She no longer accepts scraps of attention because she prepares a banquet within her own heart. Her very life becomes her testament. Her energy becomes her boundary. Her habits become her shield. And those who desire to walk with her must first learn to walk with the same devotion she offers to herself each and every day. That is the true mark of a highly perceptive woman.